For years, the BVI community have complained that the cost for food, household items, electronics, and many other products here in the BVI are too high when compared to prices in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. BVI business owners speaking on JTV Spotlight on the cost of operating businesses in the BVI said there are a number of factors that lead to higher prices. Chief among them are high freight costs and smaller volume of sales. Michael Thomas, who is the CEO at CTL Home Center, is suggesting a two-tier tax system that will give retail businesses a lower duty cost, which he says businesses will then pass on to the consumer.
The general public who is not involved in business need to really get a true sense of what it really costs to do business in the Virgin Islands. First off, we have to understand that we're dealing with not apples to apples, we're dealing with apples to oranges, because number one, we're talking about two different countries, different sets of rules that governs both of us. If you look at the U.S. Virgin Islands, for instance, and I'm not even going straight to the U.S. Virgin Islands, I'm just going to look at St. Thomas, not even St. John, with a population of over 60,000 people. The entire British Virgin Islands population is probably around 35,000 people. And I tell them to really make it, and my numbers might be off a little, but if they have 60,000 people in their marketplace, they must have conservatively over 25,000 people shopping on a daily basis, buying goods and services on a daily basis. You take 30,000 people that we have spread throughout the Virgin Islands, throughout the British Virgin Islands. I think we're lucky if we have over 10,000 people a day shopping on a daily basis. And I think, people have to understand that, those factors play a major part in terms of pricing. To move a container with hardware products from Miami into St. Thomas is about $4,300. To move the same container into the British Virgin Islands is about $6,500, right around $7,000.
So it's more than 50% more.
Easily. We're considered an international port. That's what we are. We're not a U.S. port. They're going from U.S. to U.S. and then they go international when they head over here. The first thing we have to overcome, right, is the whole freight charges. It's not that simple. There are tariffs set all through the region that a lot of these lines are actually governed by, right? And as a friend of mine, and one of my friends for Crowley said to me one day, she said, what are you complaining about, Michael? She said, your rates are inexpensive compared to places like Antigua and St. Kitts, where they're paying upwards of $8,000, $9,000 to move the same container.
Michael Thomas, who is CEO at the CTL Home Center, is suggesting a two-tier tax system that will give retail businesses a lower duty cost, savings which he says will then be passed on to the consumer.
So one of the things that I suggested then to the Honorable Premier and his government is let's look at doing a two-tier tax system in the territory, which would mean that retailers, and of course you have to define what a retailer is, retailers would pay at 5% import duties, and everybody else would pay at 20% import duties on the high end of the structure. And they could even change the structure to 25% on the high end and collect the taxes. Reduction on duty, get rid of duty on freight. There's a container surcharge that went on. A lot of people are probably not aware of it. There's a container surcharge that went on probably over
quite a few years ago.
Probably 12, 15 years ago, right? On containers, I think it's 150 on a 20 and $300 on a 40. Remove that charge because it was a temporary measure. I remember it well when it went on, and it was supposed to be temporary, and somehow it ended up staying permanent. If you remove all those fees, I tell them, even without us doing what we just did, which is adjust our prices, we changed our pricing model in the store. Even without us changing our pricing model, we could have lowered prices by 15 to 20%. It had all that came into play. And of course, I've discussed this with friends, and they go like, well, you do stuff like that, the businesses are going to pass the savings on to the consumer. And I'm like, but that's where government comes in. Government comes in, they put legislation in place, the businesses are accountable. If you're not passing the savings on to the consumer, and it's a really easy process to go through.
Isn't that an enforcement nightmare?
No, not really. Import duties and tax on Caicos is over 40%. Plain and simple. Cayman Island government protects Cayman Island businesses because of the traffic between Florida and Cayman. So it's critical that they protect their businesses. Turks and Caicos government did the same thing. The Bahamas, the import duties in the Bahamas, I think, is over 30%. Plus, they just instituted a value-added tax, a VAT tax, also at the same time.
Bahamas 20 minutes from Miami.
And 20 minutes from Miami.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, you know, you can't. We're at a disadvantage to the U.S. Virgin Islands, because for me doing business straight up, not to everybody compares us to Home Depot. Okay, guys, let's be realistic, right? Home Depot is, I forgot what the numbers are lately, right? The average Home Depot store probably does in excess of $20+ million a year, or $25+ million a year. They are served by a distribution. So when Home Depot goes into, let's say Makita Power Tools, and they buy tools, right? They're buying for their entire distribution for the Southwest, right? Or the Southeast, or wherever they're distributing.
They buy hundreds of thousands of
They're buying millions of dollars.
100,000 SARS.
Where I'm buying probably about 10
Yeah.
to service my market, right?
Yeah.
So the exactly, John, the buying power that they have is way beyond anything that any of us will actually even become close to having.
According to John Samuel, owner of the AutoSpot, businesses have to work with the consumer to ensure long-term viability of the businesses and the BVI economy. He also supported the two-tier tax duty while slamming the government's e-zone postal service.
It's important that we understand that the long-term feasibility, the long-term survival of the BVI's economy is going to depend on a partnership now with the consumer. So any initiative that's put on the table, it can't isolate, or it can't turn the consumer and put them in a defensive mode. We have to be working together to facilitate the growth of the economy, because it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. Because the retailers need growth, we need more volume. So whatever volume that's leaking out of the country through the seams, we need some of that volume back. But we understand that it's a day-to-day survival issue for the consumer. We appreciate that. So if we are tabling two-tier, we happy to say leave the tariff as it is now, so they don't see any increase. But give the retailer an advantage, so we can be more.
So you can lower the price.
So we can lower the price. So we can be more competitive.
Right.
And in the background, I think that government has this mentality. The government administration has this mentality that let's hammer the business community however we can hammer them. And that needs to change, because government needs to understand that if the local economy doesn't survive, there's no tax, there's no social security, there's no NHI. The government themselves are going to have challenges. And the first thing they need to do is to shut down e-zone, because I have a challenge appreciating how a government can defend its own economy by facilitating
its own
shopping overseas. The government, if a private company does that, I'm happy. But for the government themselves to facilitate the destruction of the economy, their tax base, it's a slap in the face.
High rent cost for retail spaces was another reason the businessmen said leads to a high cost for goods, especially for small startups. You can watch a repeat of the entire Spotlight discussion on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. right here on JTV Channel 55. The program is also available on JTV's website, jtvlive.net, JTV News YouTube channel, and Spotlight's Facebook page, Spotlight BVI.